Hey guys, this is Otaku here, and I just wanted to go over this interesting video and just tell you my take on it and say some things that I disagree and I agree on, and just have a conversation. But without further ado, let's get into it, guys. All right, oh, looks like
Berlin
yep,
now
the
has what is
volume's
called a
rising.
we gotta talk about what is happening in Germany.
Hold on.
What has been happening in Germany. We gotta talk about what is happening in Germany, more specifically what has been happening in Germany for a year now. Berlin now has what is called a side brothel, meaning that the customers, who are majority men, have the option to rent out these AI dolls, and these dolls can have conversations with them, they can physically interact with them. The men also have the option to get, a VR headset, so it feels as real as possible even though they're only talking to a machine. They can book them for hours or even the entire night. Anybody with a couple of $100 can go to these AI dolls. Now, Philip.
Okay, so um, for my take on that, Uh, I don't agree on using these as, for a brothel. I just think it's, unhygienic and you don't know what the person has that, is using this. I just feel like if you're gonna get one, you should get a personal one and you shouldn't be sharing it with somebody else. I think it should only be for personal use, and that's it. When it comes to other people using it, I mean I can't control what people do with their things, but if you're going to an establishment where this thing could be used by who knows hundreds of people, I just don't think it's safe. I think if you're going to take the risk, you might as well go for the real thing than to use something that you know is fake. TP silicone is fake, and these things are they're expensive, but they're not out of reach to where if you don't save, you can't get one. I feel like it's just not worth the risk of getting something, or who knows what can go wrong. The place that you went to is mismanaging it or not doing a thorough job of cleaning, and why would you go to one of these places? But let's jump back into the
Philip
video.
Fusenegger, who is, the owner of this, has said that people just feel more comfortable when they're talking to a machine because machines don't judge you. Is it that machines do not judge you, or is it that you can do whatever you want to a machine? Things that would be very illegal to do to a woman. Because we're getting incredibly, incredibly concerning reports on these things. You are able to customize your dolls the way they look.
So my thing is, she went straight to um, I guess AI. A lot of people are using AIs and utilizing what AI can do in different ways. Some people use it for music, some people use it for art. In this case, some people might be using it as a companion. When they're getting into the mood of acts. Um, my take on that is, um, it's people's personal choice. I think if you don't have a social life or some interact with actual people, and that's your only contact, it can be pretty bad mentally, and can cause some problems down the line if you don't have any other social interaction. That's the only interaction you have. These AI technology is getting really advanced, but I don't think it's that advanced. And the fact that you can customize the AI and you can make it to however you want, it's basically the equivalent of kind of just having a yes man. When you're doing these things and that's the only thing that you interact with, it can, I think, leave you down a dark path. I agree with that. But I don't think having AI companions is a bad thing. And using a healthy dose, I think it can be a good thing, and be creative, and you can just experience different things with it. Without even using the dolls or anything like that. Just general use of just messing around with it, having fun. Um, if you're a creative type, it can help you create a character. If you're just a person that maybe wants to practice something, you can use it in many different ways. It just depends. If you have an interview coming up, you can use the AI as a reference to, act that out. You know, or, you want to ask the girl out, you can, practice using the AI and just, try to go maybe do different responses or something. Or, you can use it for, different things. Maybe if you're an actor, you can have it read lines, back to you or something like that. For whatever script or play that you're doing. There's different implications that you can use AI for. And I think it just matters, what your social life is like, and, what the environment and state of mind that you're in, that you're using it, and the uses of it. Just like, anything, an excessive amount can be bad for you. You eat too much food, that can be bad for you. Drink too much water, that can be bad for you. Anything can be bad if it's, indulged in too much.
Look, their hair, their eyes, their skin, their size. You can even give them features that would normally be seen in, people who are below the age of 18. You can also, you reinforce the mindset that when it comes to, heterosexual relationships, the only person whose actual desires and thoughts matter are the man's. The woman is just there to do whatever you want her to do. You're going to make it impossible for these men to have actual interactions with real-life human beings. We're also getting reports on, men asking for dolls with injuries, with blood, asking to do incredibly horrific and violent things to these dolls. Things that could land them in prison if they were to do that to an actual woman. But
You know, when it comes to the body of the dolls, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't try to compare it to an actual person. It's not an actual person, A lot of these, I feel, women will try to be like, but this is bad for women. But at the same time, when you look at the toys that are meant for women, just for women, there's a lot of things that I feel that could be questionable about those. Those, dildos that they enjoy and things of that nature. Some of those things I feel are could be questionable. I feel like she's trying to say that they're just, belittling women to, these unrealistic body and proportions. Well, you can say the same thing about the toys that women use, and some of these toys that I've seen are just, just unrealistic in their spaces, and in some cases, maybe could be kind of, gross. I've seen, this, depictions of different, creatures and all these different things that they have that, they use in their space, and men don't really say anything about that. I think some of that stuff is kind of, crazy and could be seen as degrading, to a man that just degrade us to that part. If you're gonna go in, I feel on one side, then you have to go in on both sides. It can't just be, you picking. I would say, if a man is, if he has to have like the whole body of a woman and to have it actually depict as a woman, I feel like that's better than just, the other side just having the main parts, and that's the only thing that he interacts with. Um, Now, is that, does that make it right? I don't know. It's different preference for different people. At the end of the day, we're all adults. Everybody has their needs, and an object is not a person, and you know, um, you can't put things and rights that would apply that a person has on an object. You just that's la la land. That doesn't make sense. These things might look like a natural woman, but in actual reality, that these are not actual women, and you can't put laws and sense and all that stuff that will apply to actual women on these things. And I feel like it's the old argument where, like, they say GTA or some of these games are too violent. It's going to cause the youth to go out and shoot and do all these things. When in reality, most of the people that play GTA are not going out and, stealing cars and shooting up people and, robbing people for money and all that. They're just playing the game. And these guys, they're probably just, just doing wild things just to experiment. just something they thought of or they thought would be interesting, something they couldn't logically or, mentally or would even want to do with a real woman. But, this is fantasy. It's not real. That's the whole premise of why they went there, probably in the first place.
Hey, that is just fantasy. It's not reality, right? We have never seen men who are interested in these types of things and who are consuming this type of content online or now in real life with these types of dolls actually targeting and being violent towards real life human beings, real life women. That has never.
It hasn't happened. Guys that are, abusive to women, those cases were there before these dolls ever came into effect. You can't take, abusive men and people that been doing that have those traits, and then say it's because of these dolls. That's not truth. That's not the truth. And none of the guys that are being abusive are because of these dolls. I don't think so. Most of the guys that even have these, some of the reason is because they probably just don't want to deal with women, or they probably just couldn't get a woman that they would like. And that's the most reality to the situation. So when you say that these guys are getting these dolls, they are getting bad traits or getting bad behaviors, and then they're getting real women, it really doesn't make sense, because most of the guys that get these dolls, some of them can't get women, some of them just tired of the women that they attract or deal with, and are tired of the struggle of just trying to make a relationship work in the first place. So I don't think her logic of saying that these men are getting dolls, they're getting bad traits, they're doing bad, indulging in bad behaviors, and then they're taking it to real women. Like, no, they're not. They're not. Are there some guys that are abusive and, have problems and just do these things or into that type of play? Sure, but most of those guys that are into, those kind of play and those kind of kinks are finding women that are into that in the first place. And if they can't find a woman that meets their needs or their limits, then what's wrong with them going to a doll, something that's fake, and, fulfilling that, so they don't bring that to a real woman? Like, I don't see, like, most people that do things don't do it to actual people. I might play Grand Theft Auto, but I'm not gonna go outside and shoot up a whole neighborhood. You can't, put the unstableness of a few on a majority. It doesn't work that way.
Never happened before, and it will definitely not happen here. It is all just about, making sure men have a place where they can live out their depraved fantasies. Because God forbid a man is ever judged for wanting to be violent towards a woman, for wanting somebody.
They're not being violent towards women. They're being, this is a
that looks like a minor, for wanting a woman covered in.
Okay, so that's like the second time she brought that up. So most of these doll companies are, they're in Asia, and in Asia, they have different rules. I don't agree with the dolls that look underage. I don't. Um, I don't associate with anybody that has any of those, nor do I promote those or anybody that would ask about those. These underage things are wrong, and you shouldn't own one. Um, in most countries, especially in the West, I think those are banned. Those are not illegal, and dealing with people of that age is not illegal. Now, in countries where the age of consent is lower, maybe teenager age or something like that, um, you know, that's kind of where the line blurs, because maybe dolls that look like they're teenage of age are probably legal, but that's not where I live. I don't govern how they operate and what they can bring in. I don't know the age of consent in Germany where she's talking about these brothels, but if the age of consent is where those dolls that look like they're of underage um, meet and match, then there's nothing you can do about that. I think that's something you'll have to take up, with the government or whatever you have to do to get those laws changed so it can match, the dolls can match, that higher age instead of the lower age of consent rate. But, you can't just spread that, everywhere where these are, legal. If these are not a thing in Germany, then you should do something about that. If that's where you are, that's where you live, and you don't want to see those things. And I'm pretty sure there's like-minded people like you that are pretty smart and sensible that will also agree and maybe make it so where they can get that law passed. But you just can't put that over the whole group of people that have this hobby, or or whatever it is, whatever they indulge in. I don't really know what it to call it when you get these toys. But yeah, you can't just put that on a whole group.
And bruises and injuries and blood. You should never judge a man for that. That's just the way they are, right? Also, they are saying, their workday begins with a doll shower, which just sounds like the nastiest things ever because they have to clean up all of these dolls after the men are done with them. They then put on this beautiful makeup on these dolls so they look like real women. One of the dolls is called Kokeshi. Her skin is described as super soft, and it even smells like perfume. 1 hour with her costs $100, and the owner himself says that it is very rare for female customers to come, but they do have a male doll for that, even though it gets used next to never, at least not by women. The owner says he wanted to create an art gallery, somewhere where you could interact with the art by using and abusing it. That is the way you're supposed to interact.
I mean, again, here she goes about using and abusing. I think she has more of a problem that men are having these dolls in general. I don't really think it matters on what content they use it. If men were just normally using it, she'll be mad that they're using these dolls. Because how could you use these dolls that you look like a woman? It comes back to, if you're mad at one side, you can't be mad. You have to also be mad at the other side. I can sit up here and be like, how come women just use, depictions of men's, valuable parts and not the whole man, Or why didn't they just go to men? But, most men don't complain about that. Matter of fact, no man complains about that because it is what it is. But it seems like when men have something, women, a lot, especially some of these feminine types, they like to complain for some reason. Like, men shouldn't have any sense of enjoyment or just anything that, to indulge in anything, especially if it pertains, to a woman or something. It's crazy.
With art. He says after a few minutes the doll adjusts to my body heat and then it's very comfortable. At first this was supposed to be temporary, but it got more and more popular. The way Kokeshi, welcomes these men is by saying, "Hi, I am Kokeshi. I'm an intergalactic being. It's my cosmic mission to bring the intercourse of the future to the Earth." The person behind the voice is a real life human being. There's a camera and she can see everything that is happening, so she can also react to what is happening, I guess. She wants to stay anonymous and calls herself Aphrodite. She does say she's trying to also teach consent to these adult men. If somebody just, kind of jumps her, she says she'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, please ask me before you do this." Now, what do these dolls look like? They look like all the women out there, all real life women. A very big chest.
Oh, so now they look like all the real life women out there. Okay. That's interesting.
Next to no waist, because organs are not necessary when you're a woman, and very...
Okay, so that's the problem. So I guess that was sarcasm, but now she's going into, the details of what the dolls look like now. And I guess she's gonna say that they don't, I guess, look like real women. Well, newsflash. Most of your toys don't, be equipped like real men either, That last time I checked, we don't got octopus, freaking limbs down here. We don't have, stallion, equipment down there either. But it seems like you women love that. Men don't, be judging you guys on that, and, all the stuff that you do. We just let it be what it be, your unrealistic proportions that you guys be, doing, and you know, we don't say anything about that. But let it be a woman is a problem for some reason.
Very long legs. That's super educational for the men because that is what the founder is saying, that he wants the men to be free to explore and to also maybe learn something out of this. Now they're going out and learning that, women should do whatever they want them to do.
And another thing, you know, most of these men that go to these places, they go here because they don't want the hassle of being nagged or conventional relationships or to deal with any of that. They just want, to get in there, go. It's not an actual person, doesn't have actual rights. Do what they came to do and get out and go on with their life. They don't have time to probably for a relationship or to deal with, the things that come with not forget even just dealing with women, just dealing with what it comes with dealing with another person in general. So the thing that they think that these men don't know consent. Oh, they know consent, but this is not a real person. And once they paid the money to become in that room and to do what they came to do, that was the consent. That was the agreement. They don't have to ask permission anymore. This is not a real person. And I feel like there might be some backlash for saying that, but it's really not, because a common person with common sense would agree, with what I'm saying, because it's the truth. Does a woman, ask when she turns on her toy, if she can turn on her toy? No, she just turns it on. Like, what are we talking about now? This is crazy. These guys know what consent is. I'm pretty sure. There's other situations in life where you have to ask for consent for things. When it comes to dealing with a woman, that's not the only time that you have to ask for consent.
Look however they want them to look, not complain, not cry, not yell, and also very unrealistic proportions. He does say that the people who manufacture these dolls are white men. We know. It is quite obvious, but thank you. Now, as I said, there's also a VR element to this. And so you can imagine a woman that looks the way you want her to look in whatever situation you want her to be in. But then you also have the option to actually touch something in real life, aka the doll. We have the options to do so many things with, modern technology. But in this instance, it was chosen to, feed men's addiction to adult content, unrealistic ideas about women, and also make them believe that certain, fantasies that are definitely not okay are okay. There is a reason why,
Yeah, I just feel like she's kind of just attacking men at this point, that just came to enjoy themselves from, a life of whatever they were doing. Not everything has to be so serious, and not everything has to be a fight. It's okay. When it comes to the women's side of, whatever they indulge in, with their toys and the activities, men don't chime in. Matter of fact, we don't even care. But it's funny to me how every time a man has something, a toy or something that they use, that women have such a big problem with it, especially if it contains to something, that looks like them. Men don't care. All the things that I named earlier, when it comes to women having, special type of dildos and all that stuff, men do not care. None necessarily. We don't. We just don't. We don't. You don't care what you put inside yourself. Why do you care what I use for myself? Most of these men, are have these things or go to these places because they don't want to deal with women, or they can't get the woman they want, or they just can't get a woman for whatever reason. But women would be so, concerned about these guys, satisfying their own urges. But most of them don't even want to be with these men. Let's just call it what it is. Most of these women don't want these men. These are not the guys that, they're pursuing. Most of them, they're not. These are not the men that these girls are pursuing. These women are pursuing. But, they're so adamant about just, stopping this. Why? It's not real women. I never heard a protest of a guy stopping a woman from using any of the toys that she was using. It just doesn't exist. But I have heard, comments about, women about men things and saying that men shouldn't have those. It's very, it's very, honestly kind of annoying. But just not in just in the fact that why are you so concerned about it? Like I get the oh dang, I can't. I was trying to go to the comments. I can't go to the comments. What the hell? Okay, well I can't go to the comments. I'm not gonna log in, but there were some women saying some pretty crazy things. Most of them were saying gross and just crazy things and like, oh yeah, men will always do it like this. Like they never seen a woman, with some crazy inches of amount of silicone before. Like, are we are we being for real right now? You guys have these kind of things too. It's not this men. They're different, but if I would if I were to judge, I think a person that actually has to have the whole thing is better than somebody that just has to have a part. Um, and yes, some men do go to extremes. I'm not going to say they probably don't, but that's just some things that people are into. That's a whole, kink that people are into, men and women. They're into that stuff. That's a whole, industry of corn and stuff like that. That people, watch and, participate in and everything. It's not this men that are rough. When it comes to that, and women like it too. When it comes to the blood and stuff, some people are into horror and all that and stuff like that, and role playing that they can't do that in real life. It's that's someone's daughter, mother, loved one, and they're not trying to be murderers. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. So if someone, it's like saying if someone goes on Halloween and they play as and they cosplay as a slasher, they want to be a slasher now in real life because they cosplayed as a slasher on Halloween. Oh, now this person obviously wants to kill someone. Obviously, them dressing like that for Halloween is them secretly wanting to slice someone up in real life. And they can't do that in real life. So in this day, they're going to dress up like that and play as that. But one day, they're going to, decide that's not good enough anymore. And they're just going to go on a killing spree. Come on. It's crazy. But, that was the video, guys. Drop a comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me or am I bugging? I think at the end of the day, people are into what they're into, and they're gonna use what they're gonna use. Toys are used on both sides. Um, we're not people are not trying to degrade anybody. They're just using what they use. That's all it is. It's a fantasy thing. For some people, it's the only option they have. Maybe it's the best option they have. Um, some people just don't want to deal with relationships right now, and that's their best choice for them for multiple reasons. And they shouldn't be, discriminated, against because of that. I think it takes a big person to even admit, like, I'm not really in the right place or mentally stable enough to deal with an actual person. Let me just do this. That's how you not get cases where people are getting beat aside the head or domestic abuse or arguments or maybe even children being born in households that are not stable or just put in bad situations or you know maybe foster care where both the parents just didn't want the kid. um, but that's all I got for today's video. You guys have a nice day and remember to like and subscribe. Sage Otaku, and I'll be back with another one.